If you're looking for background techniques or art journaling techniques, you've come to the right place because in this video, I am going to teach you 8 different background techniques that you can use on an art journal page or mixed media page. Then I'm going to take those, add more layers to them, and turn them into affirmation cards. This is a 3-part video, so let's get started. So here are the affirmation cards that I've made in a previous video. This one was all about using different color schemes, and I'll link that video in the iCards. But on the back side, I still need to do work, and I'm going to use these tags as the substrate. I'm going to give each of these a good coat of gesso to prepare the substrate, as well as get rid of the manila color. I want a white background. I need gesso because some of the techniques that I'm going to use, you need to have it gessoed. Now you'll notice that 7 of these have the gesso and 1 does not. That's because I'm going to do a gesso resist technique and you need raw paper for that. So number 1, gesso resist. So this is raw manila. And I am going to put gesso through a stencil. Now the gesso that goes on there is going to take the paint differently than the raw paper. This will work on mixed media paper and any kind of substrate that you have. The color medium is going to land differently on it. And I'm just using a stencil, but you could just swipe on the gesso. Any gesso on there will resist or take the paint differently. I'm just using white gesso with a makeup sponge and this stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. Now, once this is completely dry, I am going to colorize it. And I'm using a combination of Prussian blue and yellow. I'm mixing it wet on there. And it's taking a little while, especially on that raw paper. It's soaking into the paper. Then for the gesso resist, if you take a baby wipe or a wet cloth, you can rub on top of the gessoed parts and knock that back. Take some of that paint out. And this is going to give, show the gessoed part. It's going to come up. It's going to bring out that little bit of texture. Now I'm applying paint and removing paint, going back and forth till I get the effect that I like. Sometimes I'm taking a little bit more paint off. Now you want to do this while the paint is still workable. And I'm kind of targeting those areas and bringing it up. This gives a very faint, very present effect. And I hope you can notice this from there, from your vantage point. It's very subtle. It's slightly texturized with the gesso, depending on how much gesso you put on. And it's a nice, soft, subtle effect. Now, if it's dry, you can use rubbing alcohol on a cloth, and that will remove more of the paint off the gessoed surface. And you can remove as much or as little. Now, the second technique is putting modeling paste through a stencil. So again, I've grabbed a stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. There's a link to their website in the description box. I'm applying a bit of modeling paste on a key card, which is my preferred way of applying. And then I'm going to put modeling paste on the gessoed surface. Most times I work on a gessoed surface. I typically gesso all my mixed media pages, all my art journaling pages. And I'm just putting this in a couple of areas. Just trying to line it up, make a decision. As you can see, my modeling paste is also from the Crafter's Workshop, and it's a modeling paste that I've used for years and years and years. It works really well. I'm quite happy with it. So I'm going to put that on. And of course, I'm going to let this or use the heat tool to dry it. Now that it's dry, I'm going to colorize it. And I'm using Naples yellow, a turquoise, and a quinacridone magenta. These all happen to be Amsterdam paints. I got them on a cheap sale. Normally I use Liquitex Basics. So I'm putting the Naples yellow and then some of the turquoise on there, mixing it again wet on wet. Now, when you first put it on the textured area, you're going to see some of that white. If you want to keep that, you're going to put it, you're not going to squish the paint into the crevices, or you can do what I just did, and I'm going for a solid coverage. But you have an option, and sometimes I do one and sometimes I do the other. I'm going to show you another way to bring out that texture and that pattern, because right now you really can't see the texture and the pattern that's there unless you look really close. So once that paint is dry, I am taking, in this case, the Naples yellow, a light color or a different color, putting it on the pad of my finger and rubbing it so lightly over top of the texture. It's catching on the high points of the modeling paste and then showing up. And I love this technique. This also will work really good with gold or a metallic paint if you want to bring that up. Now, with all these techniques, you can use them on art journal pages of any size. You could use this technique on the whole of your art journal page or in just a section of it. And you can definitely use more than one of these techniques on the same page. I'm just choosing to highlight 8 great art journal techniques that are going to give us the first layer. They're background beginnings because I'm going to add a lot to it in part 2 of this video. So you can see how that has really shown up on this tag. Just going to add a little color, tweak a little color here. And I'm loving the way this is looking at this time. But I'm not falling in love with the first layer because I know I plan on adding more layers to this. This is just the starting area. I'm kind of editing the color, adding a little more blue there, getting rid of that yellow, that bright yellow. Again, this is just a personal decision. What's in your head, what you're grabbing. And again, with the adding the color on top to bring out the texture, you can come back and add more over time. Little by little, baby steps. Don't try to glob it on and do it all in one swipe. You'll probably regret that decision. So the third background technique is using a brayer and brayering on paint. This gives an effect you can't really get any other way, and I absolutely love it. So I'm using a light purple here, and I'm putting the brayer on, and I'm going to go either horizontally or vertically. Now there's texture on my card a little bit, and the gesso isn't exactly completely smooth, so that's going to add to the effect. And I'm using, you know, and you can put as little or as much of the paint as you want. You get some of that white, you get it kind of patchy, it looks kind of rustic. And typically when I do this, I do 2 or 3 colors. My plan here was to do 2 colors, this purple and then a blue. Now, I want to avoid getting paint on the other side because it's a finished card. So I am taking time to wash my craft mat. So here is light blue permanent. Oh, I put too much on the craft mat, so I'm just going to put it off to the side. And then I'm going to do this one going up and down. Now, this has a certain amount of unpredictability. You kind of get what you get and you make it work. If you put too much paint, you can come back with white or the first color again. And depending on the order of the colors, you're going to get a slightly different effect. So here I'm adding a little bit more blue, and then I'm adding some white gesso on here because the colors were a little too bright. And you just keep going, but you can see the effect of this. And I absolutely love using a brayer for a background. Then I thought this is just kind of lacking something. This was my plan to leave it here, but I thought it was lacking. So I grabbed my Prussian blue and I'm just adding a little bit of that darker Prussian blue. And that contrast, it just makes this come alive in my mind. And I didn't put very much. I was very light-handed with the blue, but I really like that. So you've got the light, the dark, the white that shows still kept it. And so that's number 3. 4 is using magazine papers, catalog papers. Now you can use anything. This is just a floral and I'm using it as is, the whole thing, but I could rip up all reds from a magazine or greens or browns. And what you're going to get is the color. And you're going to also get some of that patterning or in there. But your goal is for this, it's not to make a background that has flowers. I'm just using the color of this calendar sheet. And I'm using a brayer to make sure I have good adhesion, cutting it out quickly once it's dry. Now here I've done it all together for the sake of ease, but this again could have been ripped using, when they have linens or sheets or towels, anything from a magazine you can use as a first layer color. Now this technique is called the plastic wrap technique, and I'm grabbing my Inktense blocks. They are ink, and they will be permanent when completely dry and completely activated. You can use acrylic paints, watered down acrylic paints, and do get the same effect. And I've done that, and I will link that video. But here I'm taking 2 colors, a pink and a purple, of my Inktense blocks, just scribbling it on the gessoed surface. It needs to be gessoed here, or it will not work because the ink is going to soak into the raw paper. You want it to be a non-porous surface so it's set kind of hangs out on top. Then I'm spraying this with water and activating it with my finger. This will work with watercolors as well. The difference is watercolors will move if you're gluing something on or put any wet stuff on here. The Inktense block, for the most part, is going to stay permanent, although I'm going to show you a trick to make sure that that doesn't happen, that it doesn't start moving afterwards, because some of this may not be completely activated. So it's pretty wet, and I'm going to add plastic wrap. And you can see it kind of has that where there's squares and the shapes that are on there. Now, the hard part here is letting this dry, being patient. And I'm not patient. So I had set this off to the side and it sat and it dried mostly. And then once it's not completely dry, but dry enough that it's not moving, I'm just removing the plastic wrap like you see me doing there. And you can see the wonderful, beautiful texture. Now, again, this will work with acrylic paint as well. So don't think you need the Inktense blocks if that's something you don't have. So in order to make sure that it is set, I'm just giving this a coat of gel medium on top, and I'm trying hard not to rub. And it really didn't activate it, so I was quite happy with that. Now, here's another technique called the salt technique that I am using again with my Inktense blocks. This was a technique I learned with watercolors, but it works with my Inktense blocks. Yes, it will work with acrylic paint as well. So again, I am just scribbling on 2 colors. It's a green and a blue. Just trying to use different colors on each card. So I'm scribbling that on, getting a good amount of pigment because I want bold colors. And then, like the plastic wrap technique, I'm going to spray this and get it wet. And you want it quite wet. In fact, I don't get it as wet as it needs, especially on the right-hand side. So you're going to see what happens if you don't get enough water on it. So I'm activating the colors and blending them with my finger and water here. And again, this works, but you want a gessoed, non-porous surface underneath. Because if the pigment, the color, soaks into the paper, it's not going to sit on the surface. You want this fairly wet, and you want it to be, you can look on the left hand side, you can see the paint or the pigment pulling. So this is salt, sea salt. Different salts will give a different effect. You can use just table salt, you can use rock salt, bigger crystals, and I'm sprinkling it on. Now, the left hand side had a lot more water than the right hand side. The right hand side didn't, and you're going to see what I did wrong. You can learn from my mistakes. So I'm putting, you can put as little or as much of the salt on. And just like the plastic wrap technique, you need to let this dry naturally. This one you can't use a heat tool on, just like the plastic wrap. So once it's completely dry, you need to take your finger and rub off the salt. Now on the right-hand side there, I got very little of the effect. On the left-hand side, where it was wet, where the water was pulling, you can see the salt just kind of sucks in and you get this kind of pock marks, which I love, but on this side, it really didn't do it. So I'm thinking, okay, it failed. What if I tried to reactivate it? So I sprayed it wet again, and as luck would have it, I hadn't fully activated it. I was able to get the pigment to move a little bit. So I'm adding more water. I'm learning from my mistake, but I'm only doing the right-hand side. I like what's on the left-hand side. And once I make sure that it's wet, the water is pulling, you can visibly see the water on the surface, I'm going to add salt again and see what I get. Now, this was a bit of an experiment. I didn't know if this was going to work, but what choice did I have? I had to take what happened and make it work. So this might be a technique you want to practice on a smaller surface before you try and attempt to do it on a more precious art journal page. So again, once that dried, I removed the salt, and yes, I was able to get a lot of those pock marks and very subtle effect texture on there. Now, because it reactivated so easily with the second coat of water, I wanted to make sure I sealed it. So I'm taking gel medium, I'm spreading it on my craft mat, my silicone craft mat, and pressing it into it. I don't want to use brush strokes on this because I'm afraid that it's going to activate the Inktense blocks and basically get rid of the effect that I had. And this gives a coat of that gel medium on there without using a brush. You could use a gel plate as well if you don't have a silicone mat, and apply and seal it. And here I'm just taking the brush a little bit and very lightly touching up, making sure areas. And if you use a brush, I did get away with it, but I'm going very, very lightly here. So warning, it may reactivate. You could try that with watercolor, the same technique to seal watercolor so it doesn't reactivate. But again, I would experiment on something that isn't so precious. Now, the seventh technique is stained glass or using bright colors, bright and bold with black. And for that, I need to put a coat of black gesso on it. So the white gesso was unnecessary here. I could have just done the black gesso, but I didn't know I was going to use this technique. It was kind of a last minute choice. I'm using gesso because it dries matte, and I know I will cover it with one coat. If you use black acrylic paint, you can, but you may need a couple coats. Then I'm taking a stencil with wide open spaces and a pattern that I'm thinking is going to make a nice background. And I'm just positioning that how I see. This again is from the Crafter's Workshop. And I'm applying white gesso on here. Now I'm careful that the stencil, I don't want it to move because I want white gesso just in the open spots, and I want the black to be where the stencil is. And I'm applying a couple coats, letting it dry in between. Now you can tape down the stencil to make sure it doesn't move. And usually I do, but I was able to hold it in place. And I'm giving it, two or three colors. Some of it's more opaque white, some of it's less, and that's going to affect how the next level does. And then I leave that alone to dry. You don't want to use a heat tool through the stencil. I want to leave the stencil right where it is. Then I'm applying color, and you can pick whatever colors, you can blend it however you want. I'm going kind of yellow and then orange and then pink, and with a little bit of blending. So whatever is white right now, where the white gesso is, are going to be those bright, bold colors. And wherever the stencil is laying is going to be black. So it's going to look like the lead of stained glass, hence the name. This is a very, very effective technique. But you want a stencil there that has a little bigger spaces or openings. And here I'm just blending the colors a little bit, and you don't really know what you get till you lift it up. So, and there we have it. Love it. Now, I decide to carefully put the stencil back in place, and I'm actually doing the second layer here because it requires the stencil. And the second technique, actually bonus technique, is stamping through a stencil. This stencil has a lot of wide open spaces, and I thought it would be cool to have a small scale stamp, in this case a script stamp, and stamp through the stencil, through those openings. Adds a little bit of black on there, and loving it. Now, the eighth and final technique is removing paint through a stencil. Now, here again, you need a gessoed surface. And I am mixing colors cadmium red and light purple, wet on wet, and I want to keep it fairly wet. You need to move quickly. So if you were doing a bigger page, you might want to do it in sections. Here it's just a small 8x4 tag, I think it is. So I can cover it all in paint and keep the paint wet so that I can remove it. Now, you don't have to have it gesso. Gesso is white. So when I remove the paint, I'm going to take it down to the white. If I did it all in purple and then let that dry and put red paint on top and I remove the paint, it would take it down to the purple color. So as long as it's a non-porous surface that it's sealed in some way with acrylic paint or gesso, this technique will work. So I'm just putting a little more paint, getting a little more blend. And yes, it does look like a hot mess. I'm just going to clean up quickly because I don't want to get paint on my underside. And then I'm going to grab a stencil. Now, you don't want a stencil that has too small of openings. This would be about the smallest. And then you're going to take a baby wipe or wet cloth and rub. And you're going to remove it to whatever the base color was. In my case, it was white gesso. It could be another color. And you can do this technique at any point in the art journaling page. And here I'm doing it on the entire tag because it's a relatively small surface, but you could do it on just one section or a couple sections of an art journal page. So here, it's just like adding another color. It's not perfect. And again, you can use, if the paint dries a little too much, you can put rubbing alcohol on your cloth and try to get the paint off that way. And it might take it more to white. So now that I have all 8 tags, I am just going to edge all of them. I am shading all the way around them with black just to kind of finish them off and make a decision about where I want to go with this. I know I'm going to put a sentiment by affirmation on there, and they're black, so I want that to show up. So I'm just edging it to finish it off, and then I'm going to show you the picture of these 8 tags with only the first initial background layer, the one where I'm teaching the techniques. And then once I do add 2, 3, 4 more layers, I will show you that result. So here they are. This one, modeling paste. This was Brayer Beginnings with 3 colors. This one was Gesso Resist. Plastic wrap technique. Removing paint through a stencil. Using magazine pages for collage. Stained glass effect. Salt technique. And there's all 8 of them. Aren't they beautiful and lovely? So now that we have all 8 of them, some of them, like this one, done. I added a second layer already. Bare beginnings. We have to add more interest on them. We need to do some more work on it. And that's what the second part of the video is all about. I do speed up the video a little bit because it's a lot of stamping and stenciling. So here I'm taking a text stamp, black acrylic paint I'm applying off to the side, and I'm just stamping the text on there. This doesn't need much. It's almost completely done, but it just needed a little bit more interest. I'm loving the texture that's there and the yellow coming out. So much I love the yellow that I grabbed some gold paint and a mark making tool, and I'm just stamping with the circular shape, just adding a little bling and a little bit more interest. And a lot of this with these tags, they're not precious. I'm going to experiment with things, and if I like it, I will do it on an art journal page down the road. And if I don't, I'm not going to. I'm just cleaning up a little bit of a glob here and redoing it. Love the way the colors look on this one. I would say that's a definite win. So this is the Brayer Beginnings, and I'm using this Harlequin stamp. I'm applying the Prussian blue and pressing hard. I'm not looking for a perfect stamp. I want this to kind of look a little worn, a little aged, a little less perfect. Love the dark Prussian blue there. And then I decide I'm going to add some white dots. This was getting a little dark. I'm going to add dots. This is a Stampenda stamp. This stamp I have used, I love. It always adds so much to one of my backgrounds. It didn't set right, so I grabbed the white paint. I'm applying white paint on this butterfly stamp, and I'm just putting some butterflies all over, just kind of as a background piece on here. How many layers are you going to add to each one? That depends. As many as it takes till you know you're done. And I stamp usually off the page as well, giving a partial stamp. That just takes the eye right to the end. It looks funny if you don't have some that are going off the edge. So I'm quite happy with how this turned out. So that was the Brayer beginnings. Now, depending on the technique and what layers you put, you're going to see more or less of that first layer. So this was the magazine one, and I wanted to put some script on it. Now, I did put script and text on this and use a lot of Naples yellow because I know that is also a color and a stamp that's on the other side. And I wanted it to kind of work together. I didn't want something totally different. Here, I'm stenciling on top of this with gold. I'm adding bling, and I thought this is where I was going to end it. But as it sat there, I wasn't quite happy, so I grabbed this stencil and black paint. Yes, black paint. And I stenciled on it, turning this into a much darker card, very almost vintage. But as you can see, we have a little bit of texture from that magazine, but mainly it was the color. So it was really the first color texture piece. This was the Gesso Resist, and I'm using a stamp, and I'm just making some of the lines on it. I didn't want to knock back too much of the Gesso Resist. It's a pretty subtle pattern, and I was loving it, so I didn't want to just cover it all up. Then I grabbed Naples Yellow and this script stamp and added to it, and that just made it. I loved the effect of that Naples yellow with that blue green type background. It just worked all together. Now you'll notice that all of these have also been splattered with gold at the end, and that just kind of unifies everything, but I think that footage is out. Loving the Naples yellow, I grabbed this stamp and I'm stamping on the background here that was the salt technique. I'm not getting a perfect stamp, but that's okay. That kind of adds to it. And, this is a stamp that I had that I loved when I bought it, and I really haven't used it that much, but I grabbed it today and, it's going to stay on my desk because I want to use it more. I really like the effect, especially when I gave up the idea that it had to be perfect. So once that dried, I'm coming in with that text stamp that you've seen me use. Again, I want these cards to be unique and different, but I want something that's the same in two or more of them that ties it all together. And I love it. And you do see the pock marks from the salt technique in real life. Here, I'm just stamping with Prussian blue on top, this little floral stamp. Wasn't sure what to do here, so then you risk it. So I'm stamping. I like the addition of the dark blue. Could have gone black. And then I grabbed a block and I've got, I believe it's Naples yellow. Excuse me. And I'm just stamping on top of that. Going on top of some of the other stamping. And this just makes a fun, colorful background. And the technique was removing paint through a stencil. And then a little bit of stamping with the text stamp. So lots of layers added here, lots of stamping or stenciling, but mostly fine, smaller scale. Of course, these are small tags, so the small scale kind of works, and you want different scale. This was the plastic wrap technique, and I love this background. I was so hesitant to try something. I'm putting black paint on this piece of cardboard and just getting some lines. Very subtle. I want the contrast. I did end up liking how this worked because you still see the plastic wrap. This is what I mean about not falling in love with the first layer. So once the first layer is there, then I'm using white and I'm stamping a dragonfly on here. I love this plastic wrap technique and using the Inktense blocks. While I said you can use acrylic paint, and I have, I think I might use my Inktense blocks a little more for this on my art journal pages because I really like the ease of it. And there we have this tag. Now this one I thought was pretty much done. So all it got was splatter of gold. Remember I had done a second layer stamping through the stencil? But this technique is a quick and easy, instant background almost. And there we have it. There's where I did splatter all the cards. So if you were eagle-eyed, you would have seen that in the pictures of each tag. I just splattered them, gave them a good splatter of gold to unify all the cards. Add bling. I like my bling. So here are all 8 cards, and I'm going to turn them now in part 3 into affirmation cards, which is no biggie, but I want something again that unifies it. And I thought, I have this doodle flower that's been sitting on my desk for a while. I shrunk it down to a size that fits the tag. And you know what? It's going to work on all these very diverse colored backgrounds. So I cut out 8 of them and I cut out my sentiments. You don't need to watch me cut things. And I'm going to glue this down with fluid, matte, medium. And I'm going to put a coat under it and on top. I'm going to seal that raw paper. It's just on copy paper. I'm going to seal it and make sure I've got good adhesion because these are affirmation cards that I'm going to have out and about my house and I want to flip through them and I don't want anything, the sentiment or the flower, to fall off. So once that's all glued down, I grab my Secura glaze pen and I'm just outlining the sentiment. This is what I did on the other side, so I wanted to keep it unified and keep it the same. But I'm not going to show you me doing this on all the cards because, again, I'm just doing the same thing. You could use a Posca pen there if you want, or whatever liner pen that you have. Then, as another finishing touch, I grab my fine line applicator bottle and I'm doing kind of faux stitching around the edge of the card. Now, on the other side, there was some faux stitching in the middle of the card right there. And I just wanted to, again, tie this side to the other side. So it didn't seem like I just did 2 random things, that somehow I planned for them to be connected. In this fine line applicator bottle, which I absolutely love, it is a must-have in my studio. It is white acrylic paint, Liquitex Basics, that has been watered down till I get the consistency, and it's a bit of a trial and error. So I'm just going all the way around. And again, I do this on all 8 of these cards, but I'm not going to show you all that footage because it's just me doing the same thing, same thing, same thing. So I've already edged or shaded around the outside edge, and I touched that up a little bit because some of my stamping went on top of it. So the black was kind of pushed back. So then what I'm going to do here is I'm just doing a little bit of shading on the doodle flower, the center and a few of the petals. And I just work my way through all 8 cards just to make that doodle flower stand out a little bit more. And there is the very beginning, the first layer. There is the second, third, or fourth layer, or however many layers, that depending on the card. So I've added a lot of interest. And there are the 8 affirmation cards. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you give one of these 8 techniques, if not all of them, a try and add them to your arsenal of things you can do on an art journal page. Until next time, go get creative.